What up, what up? It's your boy Django. Welcome to the podcast. You'll notice if you're watching for video that there is none because my phone's not working today, so I gotta go to the Apple store and get it fixed. But today is still going to be a wonderful day, and I think this topic around the Matrix is something that I don't know why no one sees it from my perspective. Like, I have waited and watched as many videos as possible, and finally I just said I got to make my own video about the Matrix because I've always seen it a completely different way. At least for the last 5 years. Like, I jumped into the Matrix again, and I just I can't unsee what I saw. And so I just want to share it with you guys really from this architect's perspective. And I think, I don't know, maybe you guys will see it, maybe you won't. But nonetheless, I will at least gift you a different way of thinking. The goal is not for you to believe what I say. It's for you to maybe discover a new way to think. That is all that matters to me. So before we get started, as a reminder, you are amazing, phenomenal, sensational, divine, immaculate, perfect, tantalizing, bodacious. I just take the time to try to speak as much positivity in you as possible because the limits of my language are the limits of my universe. And I genuinely believe that. Now, I believe we spent the last 25 years fundamentally misunderstanding the most important cinematic allegory of our time. If you ask the average person what the Matrix is about, they will give you a variation of the same theme. It's a story about revolution. It's about waking up to a hidden reality. It's the red pill versus the blue pill, the ultimate binary choice between a painful truth and a comfortable lie. We've turned the red pill into a cultural shorthand for political awakening, for seeing through the BS, and for the heroic rejection of a manufactured system. But if you actually sit with the text, specifically the cold, clinical monologue of the architect in The Matrix Reloaded, you realize that the red pill isn't an escape at all. It's a release valve. The story isn't about humanity overcoming the machines. It's a story about the staggering hubris of the human spirit and our pathological need to live within a narrative, even if that narrative is a prison. We didn't end up in the Matrix because the machines were evil. We ended up there because we were incapable of living in anything else. You see, to understand the true message of the trilogy, you have to look at the history of the Matrix before Neo ever took the pill. The architect explains that the first Matrix was a perfect world. There was no suffering. There was world peace. It was a mathematical utopia where every human whim was satisfied. And the humans rejected it. Entire crops of people died because their minds could not accept a world without friction. This is the first great reveal of human nature in the story. We are a species that cannot enjoy life if it is handed to us. We are so wired for struggle, for conflict, and for the hero's journey that when we are given a world of peace, we view it as an insult. The architect's frustration is palpable. He created a masterpiece of logic, and we broke it because it wasn't dramatic enough. To solve this, the machines realized that humans don't actually want freedom. They want the illusion of choice. They don't want to be happy. They want to feel like they earned their happiness, or more accurately, they want to feel like they are fighting a villain. When Neo meets the architect, the curtain is pulled back on the prophecy. We learn that Zion has been destroyed 5 times before. Neo is not the first one. He is the 6th iteration of a systemic anomaly. The most chilling realization is that the oracle, the prophecy, the leather trench coats, and the gritty rebellion in the sewers are all part of the machine's design. The machines realized that roughly 1% of the population would always reject the Matrix. If they left those people inside, they would crash the system. So the machines built a backyard for them to play in. That backyard is Zion. The machines give the humans a revolution to lead because they know that if humans don't have a war to fight, they will start one with their own shadows. Morpheus, the man we view as the ultimate freedom fighter, is, in this light, a tragic figure of absolute hubris. He needs the choice. He needs to believe he is the protagonist of a grand cosmic battle. If you took away his war for humanity, Morpheus would have no identity. He represents the part of us that would rather live in a cold, dark cave eating protein goop as long as we feel special and awake, rather than live in a sunlit world where we are just another face in the crowd. Think about the sheer absurdity of the choice the rebels made. This is the part we always overlook because the movie makes Zion look cool through the lens of rebellion. Inside the Matrix, the laws of physics are negotiable. Once Neo understood the code, he became a deity. He could fly. He could stop bullets. He and Trinity could have spent an eternity on the shores of a simulated Lake Como, living a life of infinite luxury, art, and connection. They could have traveled the world in the blink of an eye, experienced the height of human culture and beauty. They could have lived as superheroes. Instead, they chose Zion. Zion had no sun. Zion has no sky. It is a humid, metallic hole in the ground where humans huddle together to avoid being turned into scrap metal. There is no good life in Zion. There is only the survival of the species. They are literally cave dwellers living in a technological stone age, fighting monsters just so their lives can have the feeling of meaning. Why would anyone make that trade? The answer lies in a specific dark corner of the human psyche. We value our own sense of agency more than we value our own happiness. We would rather be miserable and believe we are in control than blissful and managed. We have convinced ourselves that real only counts if it hurts. If it's easy, we assume it's a lie. If it's hard, we assume it's holy. This is the manifest destiny story, the need to feel like we are pioneering a new world, even if that world is a graveyard. There's a scene in The Matrix Reloaded that some fans find jarring. The great dance in Zion as the machines draw closer to the destruction. The people of Zion gather in a cavernous pit to dance, sweat, and engage in what essentially becomes a massive, albeit strange, orgy. At first glance, it looks like an expression of life, a "we are still here" moment. But in the context of the architect's revelation, it is a performance. It is a group of people desperately trying to feel human because they have stripped away everything else that makes life worth living. They're cave dwellers fighting monsters so that their lives can have a narrative arc. They need the threat of the machines to give their dance meaning. Without the war, they are just people in a damp basement. With the war, they are the last hope of humanity. They could have lived their entire life of freedom inside of the Matrix. But their hubris convinced them that the struggle was more real than the pleasure. Now I want to take a minute and I want you to think about something, about the actors who actually played. Because yes, I can point out all these different pieces and moments of what the humans were doing, but also think about what the architect maybe had to do. Think about the supporting cast he created. That Frenchman, his wife, the Oracle. We treat them as characters with agency, but they are more like resident actors in a long-running theater production. The Merovingian is a pimp of information, a Frenchman who waxes poetic about causality and passion. Persephone plays the part of the scorned, soulful wife who wants to remember what love feels like. But do they actually feel these things? Or do they know that the only way to keep the humans engaged is to play these archetypal roles? They give the humans exactly what the human ego demands, a world of mystery, betrayal, and romance. They provide the textures of life. We believe them because we want to believe them. We want to believe the Oracle cares about us, not because she does, but because we need a mother figure to tell us we're the special one. We need the story to have characters we recognize, or we stop believing the story is real. Does it even matter if someone is being real or not? As much as it matters that they are willing to just play the role in our lives that we want them to play? This is why we believe them. In our own stories of life, there is a subconscious need for people to fill certain roles. If they don't, we say they are being disingenuous when we don't like them, even if the story we're piecing together is objectively bad for us. And honestly, this brings us to the most dangerous and perhaps the most arrogant part of the story. The rebels' insistence on freeing people who never asked to be saved. Morpheus famously tells Neo that most people are not ready to be unplugged, that they are hopelessly dependent on the system. We usually interpret this as the sheep being brainwashed, but looking at it through a historical lens, the rebels of Zion begin to look less like liberators and more like the missionaries who arrived in the Americas. They come with a gospel of truth and proceed to torch the lives, cultures, and comforts of the inhabitants in the name of salvation. Those people never even requested. If I love my life, if I love my children, if I enjoy the warmth of a simulated sun and the taste of a simulated steak, why must I be free? The rebels' hubris is the belief that their gritty, sunless truth is objectively more valuable than the collective happiness of billions. They aren't just bystanders, they are an invasive force. To the mother in the Matrix who is simply trying to raise her children in a world of relative peace and safety, Neo and Morpheus aren't heroes. They are terrorists trying to collapse the only infrastructure that keeps her family safe. To truly understand the cruelty of the rebellion, you have to look at Cypher. For 25 years, we've been told Cypher is the ultimate villain, the Judas of the story. But after 9 years of living in a cold, metallic sewer, eating snot-colored porridge and dodging mechanical squids, Cypher's betrayal looks more like a victim, finally realizing he was sold a lie. Cypher is the voice of the man who realized Morpheus wasn't honest. When Morpheus offers the red pill, he sells it as a mystery, a magic moment of awakening. He doesn't mention that the real world is a sunless graveyard. He makes the people go all in on a reality they cannot possibly understand until they are trapped in it. There is something deeply disingenuous about requiring someone to make a permanent life-altering choice based on zero information. It's a predatory contract. Morpheus convinces people that they need to see the truth, but low-key, he could have just been a teacher. He could have started a school or a monastery within the Matrix to teach the magic of hacking and the expansion of the mind. He could have shown people how to live as superheroes within the world they already know, but his ego demanded a war. He didn't want students. He wanted soldiers. Now, why are the rebels so obsessed with saving people who don't need saving? Well, the people inside the Matrix don't even know anything other than this world exists. To them, the Matrix is the totality of being. By unplugging someone, the rebels are effectively killing the person's entire world. They are taking someone who is a doctor, a father, or an artist and turning them into a shivering, traumatized refugee in a cave. When you look at the desperation in Zion, that sweaty, frantic orgy in the dark, you see a people who have sacrificed everything for a concept of freedom that provides no actual quality of life. They traded Lake Como for a basement. They have traded the infinite possibilities of the mind for a rigid, militaristic manifest destiny. We see this same pattern in our own lives. We find people who are happy in their ignorance, whether it's a traditional lifestyle, a job we find boring, or a set of beliefs we find outdated, and we feel a compulsive need to wake them up. We judge them for living in a simulation of their own making, never realizing that our own truth might just be a more miserable version of the same story. What kind of freedom is it if it's forced upon you? If I have to be dragged out of my bed and thrown into a cold shower to be, quote unquote, awake? I haven't been liberated. I've been assaulted. The rebels of Zion are so addicted to the role of the savior that they never stop to ask if the people they were saving actually wanted the life they were offering. True freedom would have been the choice to stay. But for Morpheus, true freedom would have been the choice to stay. But for Morpheus and his disciples, that choice is an insult to their cause. They need you to be a victim so they can feel like heroes. The human need to separate reality into the real and illusion has created a strange psychological split. It reminds me of the way people treat vacations or proximity to celebrities. We treat our everyday lives as a matrix we have to endure, a gray, boring simulation of work and bills. We tell ourselves that we aren't really living until we are on a beach in Bali or standing in a VIP section at a concert. In these spaces, we act different. We allow ourselves to be free. We spend money we don't have and engage in behaviors we normally wouldn't. We separate ourselves into two different versions of ourselves. But why? Just like the rebels in Zion, we have convinced ourselves that freedom is something you have to travel to or fight for. We've decided that the moment we are currently in isn't enough. We believe that we can only be our true selves when we have escaped our normal lives. We are willing to do things we wouldn't normally do in certain spaces because we've labeled those spaces as real or special while everything else is just the system. Now, the ultimate hubris of the humans in the Matrix is the belief that they were being oppressed by a sentient evil. When you listen to the architect, you don't hear a villain. You hear a frustrated project manager. The machines didn't want war. They didn't want to destroy the world. The humans did that when they scorched the sky to cut off the machine's solar power. The machines were actually the ones trying to preserve humanity. They built a world where we could thrive, and we rejected it because we couldn't find a way to be the heroes in a world of peace. We do this in our own lives all the time. We create enemies for ourselves because having a master to rebel against gives us a sense of purpose. It's much easier to say I'm unhappy because they are controlling me than it is to admit I'm unhappy because I don't know how to be free in this moment. What kind of freedom could we have if we realize that we can be free in this moment? That we don't have to create enemies for ourselves, that we don't need a war to have a meaning. The Matrix isn't a movie about a man who saves the world. We are not victims of an external system as much as we are victims of our own pathological need for storytelling. We have curated a version of reality where we are the misunderstood heroes, and we have meticulously populated our lives with actors, friends, enemies, and lovers who do nothing but confirm our internal biases. The real red pill isn't the realization that the world is a simulation. The real red pill is the harrowing realization that you are the one who programmed the simulation to be a tragedy. The human preference for a scripted struggle over an open-ended peace brings us to the philosophy of Jean-Paul Sartre. In his foundational work, Being and Nothingness, Sartre famously stated, "Man is condemned to be free because once thrown into the world, he is responsible for everything he does." You see, Jean argued that this absolute freedom is actually a source of profound anguish. When you are truly free, you have no excuses. You can't blame a master, a system, or a destiny for your failures. To escape this terrifying weight of responsibility, humans often flee into what Jean called bad faith, the act of lying to ourselves that we have no choice. This is why we truly hate freedom. We find it so unbearable that we look for anything to bet our lives on. A war, a manifest destiny, a religious crusade, or rebellion against the machines. We would rather live as freedom fighters in a sunless, starving cave than accept the infinite, terrifying freedom of a world where we are responsible for our own happiness. Strangely enough, the Matrix offered a level of freedom we could never have in the physical world. It was a realm where the mind could transcend physics, where you could live as a superhero or spend an eternity in a simulated paradise, and we rejected it. We walked away from godhood in a world of peace to live in the Stone Age simply because the Stone Age gave us a script to follow. We traded infinite possibilities for a role we could understand. If you're unhappy with where you are, it isn't always necessarily because you were trapped by a system. It could be. But it could also be because you were choosing a story that requires you to be unhappy in order to feel real. We couldn't believe the story if it wasn't exactly what we needed to justify our current state. We need the struggle. We need the drama. We need the Zion. But you don't have to live in a cave to be free. You don't have to fight a war to have a soul. True freedom is the ability to walk away from the manifest destiny game and simply exist without the need for a master, an enemy, or a pre-written role. But as the architect knows, that quiet, unscripted existence is the one thing humans are most afraid of. We'd rather have the Matrix. At least then we know our lines. Now, at the end of the day, bro, this is live on Patreon. I hope you guys made it to, if you're here, you made it. And I'm so grateful for y'all. I never could have imagined this growth, this journey, us being able to do this together. I'm just so thankful. I had ideas for the last 5 years, and I've tried to talk about them to the best of my ability, but I feel like I really hit a stride, and you guys chose a ride with me. So I promise to keep doing this every day as long as I can. I might miss one every now and then, but I promise, I might not always be right, but I'll always be real. I'm so grateful for you guys. I love you so much. And again, you're amazing. You're phenomenal. You're immaculate. You're divine. You're tantalizing. You're sensational. You're perfect. Thank you for choosing to journey with me again. And until next time. Peace.